Welcome to the Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks podcast. We cover all things natural, cultural, and historical in the world around us. Sit back and enjoy our sometimes snarky, often funny, and never dull podcast. Hey everybody, it's Susan with Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks.
I'm Monica with
we are
Two
here
Chicks
to
with
cover...
Hiking Sticks.
She's got a stick, I got a stick. We got
sticks.
And we are here to cover the cultural, natural, and historical stuff in the world around us.
All the fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating. Drink, drink. And so today we are covering a national park. It's one of the big 63, and it is Shenandoah National Park. You ever been on Skyline Drive? Up in Shenandoah? So
why do you ask me these things?
Well, because a lot of people have been on Skyline Drive and not really realize that they're actually going through Shenandoah National Park.
I don't even know where Shenandoah is.
Oh my gosh, that hurts me. It's in northwestern Virginia. Now, because I've always said that Virginia, I loved living in Virginia when I lived in Virginia.
Uh-huh.
And I always said that I would retire in Virginia. So I don't know why I'm still here in Texas, because I really would like to live in the western part of Virginia. And Shenandoah National Park is along kind of that ridge that goes through the western part of Virginia.
Huh. And here you are.
And here I am still stuck in Texas. I know.
There must be a reason. But we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time. But I thought Shenandoah National Park would be a good park to cover. One, because it is one of the big national parks, but two, a lot of people drive through this park and probably just don't give it much thought other than just the beauty that surrounds. So you might recall, like when we talked about the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and just how beautiful it was and how people really like to go there and see stuff, but there was like a whole cultural thing that was a part of the Great Smoky Mountains, right? The people that had lived in the area, right, and gave up their lands in order for that park to be established.
Right.
The same thing really happened with Shenandoah. So, like, if you think about where the Smokies are, which run, from Tennessee over into North Carolina,
right?
Know that Virginia sits on top of North Carolina and kind of comes at a little point with Tennessee.
Right.
And so it's kind of like a continuation. It's still like mountainous, right?
Okay.
And so this is the Shenandoah area. Now, when I lived in Virginia, I loved going out to western Virginia.
Did you love it?
I loved it. I loved it so much. It was like one of my most favorite things to do was to go to the western part of Virginia. And when you go on Skyline Drive, which is the highway that goes through basically this park, when you go through this park, the beauty of it in the fall, all the leaf peepers come out, the tree huggers come out to go see it.
Yeah.
It is worth the price of admission to be there in the fall. Now, I say that about a lot of places, but it really is pretty.
Yeah, so. I bet I can see that.
But what's interesting about this is that, we've talked about lots of parks and stuff that take up lots of land. And this only takes up about 200,000 acres. So it's not really big. It's long and narrow.
Okay. It sounds big to me, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, because when I think about the really big parks that we have, like particularly all the ones that are in Alaska, which are, a gazillion miles, right?
Right.
This only being 200,000 miles. And essentially, like I said, people will go through this park and not realize you're going through the park because a lot of people just like to drive Skyline Drive. Now, you can take Skyline Drive from Front Royal and come down, that ridge basically in Virginia, and then eventually connect to the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Oh, okay.
Right? They're all kind of connected in a way, right? It just depends on what states that you're going through. And this stretch, though, the stretch of land that is in Shenandoah National Park is about 105 miles north to south. So this is really your experience is about when you go to this park, there are two things you're going to do. One is you're going to drive through it. Number two, you're going to hike a lot of it because they have a gazillion different trails.
Okay.
And it's been around for a while. So it was authorized in 1926. It was dedicated in 1935. And there is designated wilderness area out there as well,
Okay.
which is good because it just, it's so nice that there's so much wilderness area. That means that there is nothing constructed in those spots,
Right.
which, we've learned that that's what makes some of these places so special is that they're untouched by
Sure.
human hands, which is what really makes it nice.
Are
And
we talking about the same kind of topography as the Smoky Mountains? Kind of like those low lying, softer looking mountains? Similar,
yeah,
sort
I
of?
would say it's similar. I personally, I don't. You see the roundness of the hills and the mountains and stuff. It's not as I think pronounced as like the Smoky Mountains are,
Okay.
but it is similar. And
Okay.
it'll tell you, because the main part of this park is to drive through it and to do hiking. Again, just like we talked about with the Great Smoky Mountains, you talk about how there's that fog, that smoke, right?
Yes.
That happens
Yeah.
with the vegetation and all. You get the same exact thing in
Okay.
Shenandoah. So that does exist the same way, and one time I went and it was foggy. It was literally foggy. So it wasn't just the smoke, it was foggy like all day. And you could not see anything. So you literally, there are like 75 scenic overlooks along this
Oh,
105-mile
wow.
stretch. Yeah, because the point really is do the overlooks and then get out and do the hiking, right?
Wow. Okay.
But, but when it's foggy, you're not seeing anything.
Yeah.
Basically, you're taking pictures of, bushes that are right here because you can't see out there.
You know, a couple of years ago, I went up to Toronto to visit my in-laws, and I had never seen Niagara Falls.
Oh, yeah.
And the day that they were like, "Oh, let's go," we drove down to Niagara Falls, and it was so foggy that day. Believe it or not, I could not see any bit of Niagara Falls at all. I could hear it.
Oh,
There was
wow.
a little piece by the restaurant that we were at where I could see a tiny bit of the water. The rest of it was completely invisible,
Oh,
all
my
fog.
goodness.
So I didn't even get to see Niagara Falls while I was there.
Oh, my goodness.
Yep, that's how foggy it was. So yeah, I can completely understand how there is a fog that just, you know, not even there. Yeah,
Well, when you plan your trips, especially like if you're doing a multi-stop trip, which I tend to do lots of multi-stop trips, right?
right.
That you're kind of destined to be at a place at a particular date and time. It's like you can't control what the weather's going to be. And so, it was what it was. I mean, I was just thankful that I had been to this park many times. So it's like I didn't necessarily need to see the views.
Right.
Um, but it was an interesting thing that, it was so foggy. You really didn't get any views of anything. But
Yeah.
in the fall, I've been many, many times and it is outstanding and beautiful. So,
Nice.
what I find interesting, again, this is a 105-mile road that you are basically on with lots of these scenic overlooks and stuff, but there's really only two visitor centers. So you have the visitor center that's in the north, the Dickey Ridge Visitor Center, and then you have the Harry F. Byrd Senior Visitor Center, which is kind of the central area. So they're really nice visitor centers. They're big visitor centers, so lots of things to go in and learn and see and do,
Hmm.
your junior ranger badge, because of course I did my junior ranger badge. Of course I did.
Of course you did.
And they get probably over 1 million visitors a year. But
Oh wow.
again, I struggle with. I don't know how they actually count that because there's not like a gate that they're clocking you in, or again, you're probably just in the visitor center, and then I don't know.
Hey,
Did
didn't we talked about that in the Smoky Mountain National Park one, and we just saw an article that said that the parks were trying to address that, how to count visitors
Uh-huh.
at these parks where there's nobody, you if they don't go in the visitor center, but they're in the park hiking or they're driving through, how do we count them? We have to assume that there's more visitors going to these parks than the numbers that we're seeing.
Right.
Which, if
And
they could get those numbers, it could support funding that is continues to be cut.
oh,
And now they're looking at cutting it some more. So,
I know.
there's got to be a way to record and know how many people are visiting parks so that we can prove that the funding to for park rangers and stuff needs to continue based on
Yeah,
these
and
numbers.
I'm trying to remember from that article because yeah, it was a recent article, but they were using something like, I was going to say something like location data or something like
Right.
that. But it's kind of like using Google Maps, right? Google Maps is only as good as the people who are willing to share their location.
Right.
So I always feel like I'm giving back to the world because I share my location because I need you wanted to help, right?
Yes.
So whether
Yes.
it's I'm helping you in your drive to wherever you're going, or it's helping to be counted in a national park or whatever, I feel like
Right.
that's my duty. So I do that. But
Right. And
um,
and so on that note, real quick, and then I'll let you get back to it. I think anytime that we go to any kind of these national parks, stop at the visitor center.
yeah,
Stop at the visitor center, at least until they come up with a different way to count people. Stop at the visitor center so that you get counted as part of the numbers of people that are visiting so that they can, use some justification for funding.
yeah, because I am sure, particularly on the parks that are probably not as well traveled, that people who come in, or can come in and it's open dusk to dawn and it doesn't have to have a staff person there,
Right.
they're not getting counted,
Yeah.
and yet we know that people are visiting these places. And, you think about our national park system and it's, over 100 years old. And so these places are getting old, and you want to be able to restore them if you can
Yeah.
or refurbish
Conserve
them or
them,
yeah.
preserve them, everything. And
So
try to even make sure that the area surrounding the parks. I just sent you that article about, was it the Chizos,
yeah, the chisos, yeah.
that they want to do stuff around the Chizos, which is going to impact the Chizos themselves. So yeah, it's important for us to get counted and make your senators, your representatives aware of where
Mhm.
you stand with funding for national parks. I think statistics show that the majority of people out there do not want park funding cut.
Well, I agree, and I think you're absolutely correct. And I think the other thing too, because this came up with the Manassas battlefield, they were trying to build data centers nearby, and it takes the locals to be aware of that to rise up and say no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
And
water,
for and luckily enough, I mean, that uprising is enough to make it not happen.
right?
But you have to have enough people willing to say something in order for that to stop. And so,
Right.
yeah, and that kind of goes back to when we've talked about the Smoky Mountains, and here we're talking about Shenandoah. We talk about the displacement of people, but there was a greater reason to do that, which was to preserve these forests and these mountainous areas and just this beautiful scenery that it was important to do. But just like with the Great Smokies, that land had to be purchased by the states and then donated to the government
Hmm.
in order for that to happen. The same exact thing had to happen for Shenandoah. So, but the thing that I thought was interesting that I did not realize, even with the Great Smoky Mountains, is that like for Shenandoah, I want to say 90% was like um 90% of the land was actually owned by corporations or like um um lumber place, lumber
Oh,
people.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then the rest of it was owned by, the little people who were like just trying to make a living and have their
right,
little life, right?
right.
I didn't realize it was that lopsided and who had to give up the land. So when you think about it, that's a lot for these lumbering companies to say, okay, I'm willing to walk away. Now,
Yeah,
some of the lumbering companies were like, let me clear this side of this little mountain first before I go.
sure.
Well, in eminent domain was used in both the Great Smoky Mountains as well as Shenandoah. And so it's interesting to think about that because I don't know, I didn't hear as much about that for the Great Smoky Mountains, but definitely
Mhm.
here in Shenandoah, eminent domain played a key part in getting these lumber companies to stop and get them out.
That's interesting because you never hear of the government using eminent domain against businesses. You
Right.
always hear stories about, state and city or, federal
Yeah.
agencies using eminent domain against the private citizens
Right.
to take land for whatever reason, a highway, whatever it is, business, whatever. But you don't hear about it going against businesses very often.
And I don't know if that's partly because with individuals, it's more emotional than business. It's a transaction, right?
Right, right.
Maybe it's that it's more emotional. These are families and generations of families that have lived in these particular areas and have known this land, whatever.
Yes.
But also, the other part too was that for individuals living on this land, they didn't necessarily own the land, right? So they were being displaced, but they didn't necessarily own it. Somebody else had owned it and
Hmm.
they were just working the land, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it's interesting again how lopsided it was. The companies that actually had the land that had to be acquired versus individuals, and while there were lots more individuals, they had much smaller parcels compared to
Mm.
what these big companies had. So
Yeah. That makes sense.
yeah, and I just I thought it was again. I'm always thankful when there are people who want to donate land, but in this case, it wasn't that they were willing. Well, there was some part that was like, yes, we know we need to donate this for the greater good. It was still
Right.
going to disrupt people's lives, and I'm still thankful that some people were willing to let that happen.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but okay, so as I said, it's a great driving trek to do 75 stop offs, overlooks, whatever. But as I said, now the second thing is to do the trails because there's like over 500 miles of trails in this park.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So think about that 500 miles of trails. And you could also hike part of the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, okay. Okay. Nice.
Yeah. So about 101 miles of the Appalachian Trail runs through the park.
Okay.
That's a big chunk. I mean,
That is a big chunk.
not
That's a very
necessarily
big
like maybe
chunk.
the whole Appalachian Trail, but 101 miles is a lot.
Yeah. I'm assuming that the trails vary in length and um, terrain and just what's the word I'm thinking of?
You get lots of choice.
Thank you. Choice
Yeah.
or
It's very
level.
diverse.
Yeah.
And they, the other thing that they have, which again is kind of like the Smokies too, in a way, is that they have a lot of waterfalls.
Mm.
So they have some that are, more difficult to get to, some that are not as difficult to get to, but they have a lot of that kind of scenic type of thing. To be able to take in. And of course, with that, while you can hike, you can camp, you can horseback ride, you can bicycle, you can fish, you can do all sorts of things in this park. And that's
Uh-huh.
why, you know, sometimes I guess I don't know that a lot of people think about Shenandoah National Park as a national park, but because it's not huge. But even
Right.
for not as huge as it is, there's a ton of things you can do in this park.
You just mentioned waterfalls,
Hmm.
and for anybody that might be interested in waterfalls, you might want to check out wherever the
Wherever
link
that notification is going to come
wherever
up.
wherever that notification is going to go on an interview that we did with a collector of waterfalls.
Yes, there you go, Joe Giese. There you go.
Oh, easy. Yep.
Yeah, I'll put a note so you can do an in. What do they call it? An in video, whatever link,
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah. One of those. Ding.
Um, so yeah, so again, there's so much to do here. There's lots of wildlife that are in this park as well. I mean, you got black bears, you got deer, you got bobcats, you got wild turkeys. You got tons of different kinds of birds. Um, but I wanted to give my little personal thing about Shenandoah and what it means to me.
Cool.
Oh, Shenandoah.
Oh, I should have known you were going to sing.
Well, and I don't, this is funny because one of the first musicals coming out of high school that I did professionally was the musical Shenandoah.
Oh, really?
I loved playing that musical. Oh, it was wonderful. So I was in the
I've never
production
seen
for
it.
that. It's a really neat one. So I had played it and just the whole musical is like my favorite, well, like one of my favorite musicals, and I
Uh-huh.
could almost recite it line for line. Because then I moved to Virginia, and I knew some friends that were like in the theater business, and they did a production of Shenandoah. They needed a clarinetist, and I got to do it again.
Oh, that's
Like,
cool.
yeah, I got to actually play that musical for the second time, and that
And you
was
got
it
to
was,
play it there.
and to play it in Virginia. I
Yeah, that's
know.
awesome.
But that's why the musical is just near and dear to my heart, and Shenandoah is just near and dear to my heart. So there you go. That's my personal connection to this park.
That's awesome. I mean, I knew there was a musical called Shenandoah. I don't think I've ever seen it, or if I have, it's been in little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Um, but that's very cool.
Yeah, it was. They were nice runs. I mean, I don't know. I loved playing in the pit orchestra for musicals. I've done
Uh-huh.
several, but I loved doing those. I just thought that that was just so cool to have a job that allowed you to do that. But
That's very cool.
yeah, so that was my musical little interlude there. But but this is also one of those parks, because it was like around in 1935 or whatever, that the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, did a lot of the construction that was in this park. So
Ah,
again, we're very thankful for those folks who spent that kind of time and made these parks, to this day, withstand the traffic and stuff that goes through these parks.
yes.
So kind of cool.
Again, we've toyed with the idea. We really need to just kind of sit down and do a podcast about the CCC
Yeah.
and all the parks that they contributed to, that are still standing and still quite viable and really impactful. Some of the stuff that they did.
Well, and
Um,
how the stuff that they constructed, particularly like the buildings and stuff, became kind of the National Park Service look.
yes,
It is
exactly.
the
Yeah,
look
it's the
that every
signature.
new park, New River Gorge that just became a park a few years ago. I mean, that is the look of
Yeah.
what these parks look like.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
it's their
yeah,
signature, and
yeah.
yeah, we really need to do that. I know we've talked about it, but we really need to put
We
pen to
really do
paper.
spend time doing that.
Yeah, that too.
So there's really not a whole lot. I mean, not a whole lot else to say about this particular park other than it's worth it to go and just experience it. I don't know that there's as much to learn per se. It's not like a
Right.
history kind of place. It's more of a cultural understanding the people that lived here before, even the Native Americans that were here before the
Mhm.
settlers came in. Um, it's more about that and getting out and then enjoying nature as it is, and all those miles and miles of hiking trails that you can enjoy.
Nice.
It is just worth it to get out there and breathe some fresh air
Yeah.
and do the, what is it, Shinrin Roku?
Shinrin Roku? Shinrin Yoku? What did
Do
you
your
say?
force bathing.
Yeah, that forest bathing. Yeah, that.
Yeah, 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 that. So yeah, so I think that's about it.
Well, that's interesting, and that's another one I'm gonna put on my list that I think I would really like to go to.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, I mean, because to me, you're going to do it on the way through or from something else.
Right.
And I would say make a couple of days stop around there. Again, we stayed in Front Royal, which is on the northern part. That way,
Mhm.
when we woke up that next morning, we came all the way through the park and we had
Right.
all day to experience it. It
Nice.
doesn't take you all day to go through it if you're just trying to drive through it. But if you actually want to drive and stop and hike, it's going to take you a full day,
Okay.
and there's not a whole lot of cell service on that road, so just beware. Um, but that's really perfect for disconnecting and enjoying the sights that are out there.
Exactly. And
So,
don't forget, anytime that we talk about hiking or going to parks where hiking is the predominant activity, make sure that you check ahead of time on the website for any closures or any trails that aren't going to be available or accessible. And when you go to the website, you can download a checklist of gear that you might want to have if you're doing longer hikes, mid-size hikes. It's on there. It's free. We have a link to the National Park Service
mhm.
that talks about getting ready for your visit to the parks. So just make sure you're prepared when you're doing these things. And this sounds like a great place to be prepared and go enjoy nature.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, back with that list, is that this is one of those places that the weather can change pretty fast and be raining
Yeah.
one moment and sunshiny and humid the next, and then you have little flying bugs everywhere, right? So it's
Yes.
kind of like that's the stuff that you have to be prepared for. That any of that could happen at any time. So,
Right.
but again, those are just things that you just plan for, and you get out and enjoy, and it'll be well worth the time.
We've got another video about what we keep in our packs, and maybe we can link it here somewhere.
Yeah.
But I remember one of the things that you always carry is the mosquito netting, because you never know.
Because inevitably, when I go outside, if there are gnats to be found, they're going to find my ears, and
Right.
I'm tired of them
Right.
going. Zzz, zzz,
Yep.
zzz.
Yep.
So yeah, I have a net that goes over my head, so I
Yeah.
don't have that issue.
That's right. That's
So
right.
if you're like me, you might want to have those. The bundles up real small.
Be prepared.
That's right. Okay, well, I don't think I have anything else, but this is definitely one of those places that you can hike your own hike.
Nice. Sounds
Yeah.
great.
So be sure to subscribe to us and like us and follow us on YouTube at Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks.
You can
And be
buy
sure to,
merch.
you can check out our merch on Zazzle. I'll put a link in here for that as well. And
You buy us a
support us.
coffee.
Yeah, buy us a coffee. Support us any way that you like.
We'd
All right.
appreciate it.
Anything else, Monica?
Nope. That's all I got.
All right. Then that's all I got too. I guess then we'll see y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and remember to follow our podcast wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks on YouTube, where you also get to see our lovely faces, pictures, and videos of our journey.